On behalf of the Winnetka Public Schools Foundation, welcome this evening. I'm Shelley Keller, and I am co-chair of the foundation along with Virginia Cardoza. We're so glad that you could be here to join us tonight for what we hope is a lively Q&A session after what we're sure will be a wonderful presentation. So get your questions ready, and we're looking forward to it. While many of you are probably familiar with the foundation, I thought I'd take just a minute to highlight what the foundation does and where events such as this sort of fit into the scheme of what we do. The mission of the foundation, since it was founded in 1995, has been to raise private funds in the community to support excellence and foster innovation in the elementary and middle schools across Winnetka. Every year we raise money and provide grants for innovative programs that enable teachers to pilot new learning strategies in the classroom, that enhance the curriculum, instruction, and assessment across the district, and that promote school-wide initiatives in social and emotional learning. Tonight's event is possible through the generosity of Charlotte Carlson, who is a 35-year-plus alum of the Winnetka Public Schools. She taught at Hubbard Woods and then at Skokie School. When she passed away in 2002, she made a very, very generous gift to the foundation. A portion of the funds she designated to promote community education events such as this one. So we're very grateful to her and her very generous gift for allowing us to have an event such as this one. So we are very fortunate tonight to have Sam Chaltain with us. He is a noted author and education activist, and I'm going to let Dr. Thomas Hagerman talk for a minute about the work that he's doing with the district, and then we will turn over the floor to Sam himself to get us started. So thank you again for being here, and we're just glad that everybody could make it.
I would also like to echo the sentiments. I would like to thank both Virginia and Shelley for being here tonight and sponsoring. But also, we have lots of other foundation members in the audience. And as you just heard, the work is really invaluable in terms of providing the kinds of supports to our district that we need to do professional development and other kinds of activities. It just simply would not be possible without the support of the foundation and the community. So we really appreciate all that you do on our behalf. I have the privilege of introducing Sam to all of you tonight. Sam, as you were just told, is a national educator and an organizational change consultant. I had the privilege, along with many other staff members here from Winnetka, to first meet Sam at the Penn Conference that was hosted this year at Francis Parker in the fall. And as soon as Sam spoke, there was chatter among the Winnetka contingency about his intellect, about his energy, and about his passion about education reform, not only at the national level, but at the local level as well. And we were already trying to think after the conference of ways that we could use Sam in our ongoing work here in the district. And so we're very, very pleased that tonight is really the first of a series of opportunities for us to be able to engage and work with Sam. So just to let you know a little bit about what our day looks like, Sam has been here since early morning. We met around 8 this morning and toured all 5 schools over the course of the morning and early afternoon. So I had an opportunity to acquaint Sam with not only the schools and structures themselves, but our teaching staff and some of the philosophy that we aspire towards as part of our Winnetka educational process here. After that, we met with the Summer Institute Planning Group, which is a number of staff members, including teachers, who are really charged with the task of creating our Summer Institute program that will occur just after the end of school. And so, again, tonight's presentation, the work that we did on Progressive Ed a little bit earlier in the year in April, will continue on into the summer with probably at least half of our staff members continuing to work on values that we hold dear in our Progressive Ed practices and how we can use and strengthen those over the course of not only the next year, but many years to come. So we look forward to that as well. And then, of course, when Sam met with the staff this afternoon, we had all of our teachers present in this very auditorium and listening to a presentation very similar to the one that we're going to hear tonight. And so part of that for us is developing the common vocabulary along with the common values and beliefs that we just talked about as we move forward as a community of learners here in Winnetka. So just a quick introduction in terms of Sam's background. Sam is the founding director of the 5 Freedoms Project, which is a national organization that equips local educators with leadership development, coaching, and support they need to address improving the performance of public schools. And prior to this, Sam was actually spent 5 years as the co-director of the First Amendment Center, which also has a strong commitment and focus on national K-12 reform. Sam started off like many of us, several of us, as a teacher. His first teaching position was actually in Beijing, China, and then spent 5 years teaching in public and private schools in New York City. So he's not only sort of knows the talk, but he actually has the experience behind it in terms of backing up his beliefs and some of the other information that he's going to share with us tonight. And those of you who happen to visit the book table know that Sam is also a prolific writer, has co-authored 5 separate books, and has also been hosted in a wide variety of magazines and newspapers. So Sam's personal motto is to do your work and then step back. So having done my work, I'm very pleased and privileged to introduce to all of you Sam Chaltain.
Thanks, Thomas. Good evening, everybody. How's the level of the mic? Okay, can everybody hear me? So, I'm really excited and honored to be here. I'll tell you a little bit about the day because it relates to what we're talking about. But I just have to start by, first of all, thanking all of you for making the time to come out on a weekday evening to participate in a conversation like this. It's never easy. It always requires some juggling at whatever stage of life or family development you're at. And so I'm really grateful that you've all made the commitment to come here. And I do a lot of public speaking, but I think it's safe to say this is the most intimate audience that is close to my heart that I've ever been able to speak to, because not only are there all of my new friends in Winnetka Public Schools, because as Thomas said, we've been together since 8 this morning. We've been in all 5 campuses, but some of my closest friends from high school are here, some of my closest friends from college are here, my mom is here. So I just want to start by saying that together you're already a part of a really intimate community for me, and I'm really grateful for that. So real quick, I'll tell you about what we're going to do, but I just have to say, I've had the most amazing day. This is why I really do have the coolest job, because my job today was just to come and bear witness to what's happening in Winnetka Public Schools. And so I've seen second grade hallways transferred into living oceans. I've entered the let's pretend room of a kindergarten classroom that 5-year-olds had turned into an animal hospital and were dressed as doctors performing surgery on their stuffed animals. I've seen so many smocks. I mean, a smock, remember smocks? Like, we talk about the dangers of education and the fact that it's losing arts. Everywhere I see are people are wearing like their dad's old work shirt, you know? The arts are alive in Winnetka Public Schools. So it's been pretty amazing to see and to learn more about the history of a district that is unique in our country in that it was founded to be an anchor for progressive practice. And so those of you that are here as members of that Winnetka Public Schools community, let me tell you what you already know. There's something very unique and special going on here. And with that comes a great gift and a great responsibility to think about how to take what you have here and not only improve upon it, but use it in ways, leverage it in ways to ensure that there are more places like this. So that's what I've seen today, but I know that I'm here because my work takes me around the country, working with lots of different schools, and I live and work in Washington, D.C., so certainly being aware of the policy conversations that take place at 30,000 feet. And so I know for both the people here from Winnetka Public Schools, but also the other parents and teachers that are from the greater Chicagoland area, the larger climate that we are living and working in is not actually set up to incentivize the smock. And so if anything, we have to battle to preserve the space for the Let's Pretend room, to say that we value the development of the heart and the hands as much as we value the development of the head. And so what I want to talk about tonight with you all, and I'll tell you a little bit about how it's going to go in a minute, is I want to try to paint a picture of that larger issue, kind of in 3 phases. To first just talk about the context of what we're actually laboring in and what we may need to escape from, let's name it, to then talk a little bit about the realities of the present day and some of the possibilities that might lead us out of this. So context, realities, possibilities. And the last thing I'll say, and then I promise I will get started, is I'm not going to speak at you for 45 minutes and then we'll take Q&A, although I think there will be time for that. We have no excuse anymore to continue to do things the way we've always done them. We know way too much about how the brain works. And so all of us have had the experience of like sitting passively for 20 minutes, and even if something's really interesting, you just start to space out and focus on something else. So I will build in opportunities throughout those 3 periods for us as small and large groups to make sense of what we've heard, so that we are not left to just sit and absorb it all and then try to make sense at the end. Sound good? All right. So the first thing I want to share with you, how many people in this room are familiar with the TED conference and TED Talks? Most, but not all. So TED is an acronym for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. It was a conference that started out in Silicon Valley, and the basic idea was bring different people from lots of different industries together, give them 18 minutes, and say, tell us about an idea worth spreading. And there's a lot of fascinating resources out there. What I want to share first is a TED Talk that I heard recently that, for me, helped clarify exactly what it is when we talk about the fact that, yeah, schools, they're not quite, they're good, but the schools that maybe worked for us or even didn't work for our generation, kids today is a different set of challenges. We've got to move away from something and towards something, but what is it exactly? So this particular TED Talk, that's Simon Sinek. He's not an educator, and his TED Talk was not about education at all. It was about some work that he had been doing, studying the core characteristics of transformational organizations and or individuals. In other words, why Gandhi? Or why Apple? I mean, raise your hand if in this room, for personal or professional purposes, you have an Apple product that you would consider essential to your life. I mean, what's up with that? Like, what have they done? I have it right here. I have my own phone. This is my MacBook Pro. Like, what have they done to us? I mean, because they're just an electronics company. Initially they were just a computer company. Now they're an electronics company. They have the same access to talent and communications as everybody else. So why Apple and not Dell? What allows Gandhi to be an individual that can spearhead a movement to topple the British Empire? We think we have challenges in school reform. He toppled the British Empire. And what he realized was, so this is the simplest innovation that he came up with. He calls it the golden circle. He's like, here's the deal. Whether you're looking at someone like Gandhi or somebody like Apple, or any of us, let's stick within the realm of organizations. And I'm going to stay with organizations, so you can think of schools, but also think of the organizations where you work. You could think of a Fortune 500 company. You could think of a country. Almost any organization you'd like to think is pretty aware of what it does. Right? We make computers, we sell shoes, we buy insurance. Less companies, organizations, and schools are equally clear about how it is that they do what they do and why that makes them distinct. And almost no organizations and schools are just as clear why it is that they are doing what they're doing and ensuring that that why is animating their work every day. And here's an example. So his point is, most organizations communicate what they do from the outside in. We start with what's clearest, and we worry least about what's fuzziest at the center. So if Apple did this, Apple would communicate something like this. We make computers and phones. We do this by paying very close attention to aesthetic design and functionality. Want to buy one? Not really. That's kind of what Dell does, right? I mean, that is basically the Dell marketing model. What Apple does is Apple communicates and envisions their work from the inside out. So the reason we all have Apple products is because they communicate with us this way. We believe that everything we do is about challenging the status quo and empowering people with the tools they need to come up with tomorrow's innovations that will change the world. We do this by paying close attention to aesthetic functionality and the usability. And oh, by the way, we happen to make computers. Want to buy one? It's a subtle shift, but and again, he's not thinking about schools. But what it made me realize is there's actually something really relevant in Simon Sinek's message when I think and when we think about education. And so let me actually work the pivot. So to differing degrees in this room, and let's think about a different sort of bullseye, okay? And I've added another layer to the bullseye. The industrial era model that everybody in this room grew up in and was educated through, right? 100 years ago, the first time, unprecedented numbers of young people that needed, in effect, to be processed through our formal system of schooling as an aftermath of the great immigration of the late 19th century. So there's a reason that we borrowed the language of the factory. We literally had to batch and queue students through a system. That's why we had bells, that's why we had 45-minute classes, that's why we had standardized instruction. And if you take Sinek's idea, what we're doing, even though you see the what is at the center, it's a way of communicating from the outside in. We begin with what's clearest, what we teach. Content, right? It becomes driven by what kids know, by what's in the textbook. And everything flows backwards from that. So if that's the most important determinant, well then how we teach is obviously drill and kill, chalk and talk instruction, right? Where everybody sits in rows, you sit quietly, I'm the expert, you know nothing, I'll test you at the end. If you didn't get it, that's your fault, not my fault. Why we teach? Industrial revolution, batch and queue unprecedented numbers of kids. Enter them into an economy the contours of which were largely known and easily identifiable. And who we teach, this doesn't factor in. I mean, the point is, we don't have time for that. That's the furthest away from the bullseye of the industrial era model. Now, I'm not even bringing all that up to say, look at how horrible that was. Maybe that was actually the best choice at the industrial model. It actually, who cares at this point? There's no point in debating whether or not it was the good model back then. I think we can all see pretty clearly, though, that this is not the model that's going to work today. We've got to change this. And to me, in the work that I do with lots of communities, this is the question that everybody's struggling with. Yeah, but to what? I mean, and so then I saw the Sinek thing, and I was like, well, actually, he figured it out for us. We just have to invert the paradigm. The paradigm shift is moving from the what at the center to the who. Imagine a school system that begins with the unique individual and his or her strengths and weaknesses as the centerpiece, and the goal is to reach that individual and help them discover their unique strengths and unleash their power on the world. How would that change the rest of this? Well, why we teach, then it becomes a lot more than just about the economy. And there's a lot of different ways you could put this, but I'll offer one. It's to give kids the greatest gift of all, whether we're in a democracy or anywhere else in the world, which is understanding what it means to be free. I'll say that again. Why are we doing it? We're equipping kids with the skills and the understanding they need to understand what it means to be free. I've got some friends in the house from Milwaukee, folks that I worked with at their school, and the primary in Wisconsin is tomorrow. And I mean, I bring it up only because we talk about what it means to be free. 2011, that's the biggest year of revolution and upheaval in the world since 1968. From Tunisia to Wisconsin, from the Tea Party to the Occupy movement. We are in the midst of a global yearning for a deeper understanding of what it means to be free. Imagine if our schools began with that recognition and evaluated themselves against that benchmark. How do we teach if those are the goals? Well, clearly, it's got to become a lot more personalized and customized. It is no longer acceptable for me as a teacher to assume that if you didn't get the lesson, that's on you. My job every day is to diagnose and to meet the special needs of different folks. And in this construction, what we teach actually becomes least important, which doesn't mean it's not important. But I was saying earlier, I have a 93-year-old grandmother. She asked me recently, I was talking with her on the phone, she said, "Sam, what exactly is Google?" It's like, Gran, imagine asking me any question right now, and on the phone I am holding, I could pretty quickly get you a reliable answer to it. She was like, and I was like, wow, I mean, that's really cool. How is this changing how we think about content? This has to change how we think about content. I mean, it's the medieval model that used to be where you have to just pour all of that information into the head and the individual has to carry it around. That's the only way you have expertise. Well, now I have it in my pocket. How is this changing how we think about all of this? So, I told you I was going to build in time to process because that's a lot. But what I wanted to start with for everything that follows is to clarify that based on what I see across the country, this is exactly the shift that people are struggling with and trying to affect. And the simplest way to put it is it's a shift from the what to the who. It's becoming less standardized and more customized. You with me? The problem is that that's, of course, not what's happening. Actually, if you look at national policy trends, the policy trend is to become more standardized, more centralized, more externally focused, and even more myopically focused on just the head as opposed to heart or hands. Look no further than Waiting for Superman. And forget about the other ways in which this movie became a political lightning rod. Raise your hands if you saw it. Raise your hands if you heard about it. Not that many people actually saw Waiting for Superman, but the Gates Foundation spent over $2 million on the marketing, so everybody heard of it. And it really, I mean, if you're going to point to a single media event that's the most seminal event about education in the last 10 years, it's easily this movie. And this is a still from the movie, so those of you that saw it may remember it. They had a lot of animated graphics in the film to try to make certain points. And this is an animated graphic where the narrator is speaking uncritically as he imagines the good old days when it was so much easier. When all the teacher had to do was basically open the head of this passive, empty vessel and pour the knowledge in. And this image is being offered uncritically. What you are seeing on the screen, Waiting for Superman thinks, yeah, right? That's what we need to get back to. That is a deep, fundamental problem that involves all of us if we want to even have a chance in Winnetka, Chicago, or the country at trying to bring about a change from the what to the who. And with that, I've done enough talking initially, so I've just thrown a lot at you. Here's one possible thing a prompt to think about it as you make sense of it is, okay, so if there's some validity to that, and I'm open to if people feel that there isn't, what should schools start, stop, and keep doing to place the who at the center of learning? And I specifically said start, stop, keep because we have a tendency to rush to the negative. But obviously there are a lot of great things that I already mentioned that are happening in Winnetka Public Schools. I'm sure for those of you that aren't a part of this community, there are also great things happening. So let's acknowledge the ways in which we're already pointed in the right direction. And let's get more specific of if this is the change, then what needs to happen? I'll give you about 5-6 minutes. Question?
Yes, please. You said what, for what, the best thing to teach and the most important thing is what it means to be free, right? And I've been told more than once that Winnetka's unofficial motto is educating for citizenship. And so I'd like to ask you, are freedom and citizenship, in your opinion, two sides of the same coin, or do they have some other relationship that you can comment on?
Interesting question. I'll try to answer it really briefly because then I really do want to give you all an opportunity to hear some other voices. I think one of the things that we don't understand about freedom generally is that the two sides of the coin when it comes to freedom are freedom to and freedom from. And what I mean by that is, there is a paradoxical but mutually dependent human need when it comes to freedom. That on one hand, we need the freedom to determine our own path, the freedom to, right? The freedom to speak our mind, the freedom to have a say over my own career or where I live, or don't tread on me, all of that stuff. And there's an equally important need to feel a sense of safety, order, and security, the freedom from. So freedom and structure, I think, are inextricably linked, and so perhaps, to some degree, freedom depends on some understanding of citizenship, because freedom itself does not exist in a vacuum. We become, not to get too into this, but I mean, I can't exist as an individual without the benefit of all of you. It's why I chose to let all of you know what an intimate audience this is for me. I mean, there's a greeting in a tribe in South Africa that actually got taken by Avatar, and now lots of people have heard of it, where the greeting, instead of, hey, how you doing, is, I see you. And the response is, I am here. So there is already a sense of community in the notion of what it means to be seen and to be free. And I think schools that help kids really understand all of those components are the schools that are doing the best to ensure that we can remain free. Does that help answer it?
Start.
All right, fair enough. But let's go back to that other issue and just turn to the folks closest to you in whatever group, and if this prompt helps, great. If not, just talk about what you're thinking about and what it makes you wonder. And I'll let you know when we come back. I'll come back now. What did you hear that struck you? And I ask in particular that way because I'm sure you yourself said something brilliant, but I'm actually interested in hearing what you heard somebody else say that struck you, good, bad, or ugly. Let's hear what the group is thinking.
There was a mention of classroom size and how this is interesting, but it's very idealistic. How do you give this individual attention when there's so much growth and it seems like classroom sizes are growing? So that was one thing that I thought was interesting.
How do you do something like, what's the right ratio of adults to kids to even make something like this possible?
There was some confusion about freedom, what it specifically meant, and just among ourselves, they came up with this idea. It's not mine. But sense of evaluating and empowerment on the part of the child, who often feels that they can't say I'm here, but they don't even feel seen. So that does reflect like the sense of freedom for that child once feeling that they're seen, to say I'm here and I'm empowered to evaluate information. And the earlier we start, the better. Because sometimes kids in high school don't.
So understanding freedom in part as visibility. The power and the sense of ownership that comes from feeling and being visible to others. What else? Yeah?
I heard that in the industrial era, one probably did not need or have as many resources as your model proposes the arts.
It's not my model.
Not yours.
Yeah.
But to do that, you would have need a lot of funding, which our schools sadly don't have.
Okay. What else?
I just have a thought. This wasn't something I heard, but sitting in Winnetka, the assumption is that all the resources are here, yet there's still a struggle here. And I live in Chicago, and the talk is there's always a lack of resources in Chicago, yet there's the same struggle. And I just find that very interesting that while dollars and cents may make a difference in impact, there's the same struggle going on with where we go and how we get there.
And actually, the per pupil expenditure in Winnetka Public Schools and in Chicago is almost exactly the same. So I know it's not that simple, but if you look at least that one metric, the money that's being invested is the same. Interesting. One more, if it's burning, or shall we move on? Yes?
I feel like this dialogue has to stop or has to start from the top down because as until the administration at the top puts the who first instead of the what, with all these mandates and coming in and checking up on what we're doing in the classroom and babysitting us in a sense. I'm in Milwaukee Public Schools. I feel like until that dialogue happens, can this really happen?
I think that's part of it and not all of it, and we'll kind of get there. I mean, obviously, there's no doubt that leadership is essential. If we're going to bring about any sort of serious shift in how we think about education in this country, we have to have people like Thomas, that are superintendents, that are people that really have an opportunity to set direction, to be committed to being collaborative and involving the community and deciding as a group, of all the things we can do, what must we do here in Winnetka. That's part of it. And we sell ourselves short if we think that we are helpless until that happens. And part of it is just a different orientation that all of us have to have. I mean, I was saying this earlier, what we are talking about tonight is very akin to the challenges of being an alcoholic. Bear me through, okay? I couldn't possibly, if I set out today to stop drinking, I couldn't possibly do it if I began with the notion that I'm never going to have a drink again for the rest of my life. It's too big. I'm guaranteed to fail. And if our initial focus is purely, how the hell are we going to do this? We don't have the money. Oh my God, we're screwed. We'll never get there. Well, we are screwed, and we'll never get there. The way you stop drinking is one day at a time. And the way we start to think, regardless of what position we're in here, whether you're a superintendent, a teacher, a parent, an active community member, all of us have the capacity to be leaders. And to me, one of the most valuable things I've learned about leadership is the most effective leaders hold a creative tension between the distant vision, and this is just one image. I mean, I even think we overvalue the notion that we just have to keep kids on this assembly line to get them into college. That's a whole other story. I mean, maybe, but it just depends on the kid. But so here's the distant vision. But if we're only focused on one side of the equation, we're not going to get there. So that's my son, Leo. You can tell I went to the University of Wisconsin. Shameless plug. Successful leadership is holding that creative tension between the distant vision, one day, all schools will, and the up-close focus. This week, Winnetka Public Schools will. This week, I will. Tomorrow, I will. And it's both. It's not either or. The problem is we either get so wrapped up in the here and now and feeling like we're so besieged and we can't see beyond anything, or we get so dispirited by how distant the goal of being is that we start to define ourselves as powerless. We start to see ourselves as being invisible. And if we see ourselves as invisible, we are invisible. And if that's the case, then we're not going to be a part of this. Here's another piece that I think is really interesting if we think about the challenges that all of us face to try to be a part of something powerful, a different kind of solution. Anybody heard of the book Thinking Fast and Slow? It's just come out. A couple folks. It's like, it's brand new. It'll be featured in the windows of all of the bookstores. It's written by a guy who won the Nobel Prize. He's been researching for decades how the brain works. And I'm going to show you a short video that you can see is a part of a research study from 1944. This video is 70 seconds long, so you know what you're getting into. And the only thing I'm going to ask you to pay attention to is to be prepared to describe what you see. Just turn to the person next to you and just do a quick check-in. Tell them what you think you saw and hear from them what they think they saw. All right, let's see if we can come back together real quick after that one. So, just a few shout-outs. What'd you see?
My 3 children on the older side.
My 3 children. What else? A bullying kind of playing out. What else?
2 against 1.
2 against 1.
What was the temper tantrum?
Temper tantrum. Some people see an action adventure. One of the teachers today said she saw Young Love. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. What's the problem here?
Everybody sees what they want.
Well, yeah, and even more so, it's just figures moving around on a page. It's none of those things. So why is it that all of us are seeing actually things that may have slight difference of being slightly more personalized than others, like it's my 3 kids, but we're all in effect seeing variations on the same human drama, and it's 2 triangles and a circle. So the point that what this study helped prove, and part of what he talks about in Thinking Fast and Slow, Dan Kahneman, is we basically have 2 systems in our mind, and there's the fast way that we think and the slow way that we think. And the fast way that we think is the first way that we gather and make sense of information. And it is unconscious, and it always happens, and it is the first way that we interact with the world. And the way that this system 1, works is it immediately looks to establish coherence. It finds the story. You all found the story. The story may be slightly different, but all of them were stories. And it creates that coherence primarily from the available cache of memories and emotions that we have stored in our brain. Then there's system 2, which is the slower form of thinking, which is the more complex form of thinking, which is definitely the form of thinking you use when you take a really intense class. It's the form of thinking that you most associate with yourself, what makes you distinct as a person, and it's lazy. So if system 1 comes up with a pretty coherent narrative, yeah, I'm going to tell you this is about your 3 kids. System 2 is like, works for me. Good enough. Do you see the significance of the impact that this study, if it was more widely available, might have on the way that we think about everything? Not just teaching and learning, but parenting, but the way that we communicate internally, externally, in our organizations. I mean, we see the world through our emotions. We see the world through stories that create a sense of coherence, even if it's incorrect, and that establish quick lines of cause and effect. And yet, we continue to operate in a system that believes that the primary things of value that we can impart to our kids is a deeper cognitive ability. It is not how the brain works. So we have to be more mindful. We need a different way of seeing, and that's one example. There's another great book. Anybody familiar with the book called Theory U? Anybody? Also not an educator. Theory and then the letter U. This guy named Otto Scharmer. He's at MIT, specializes in organizational behavior. Fascinating book. But he tells the story of growing up on his dad's farm in Austria. And his dad took him out there at one point and said, son, tell me what you see. And this 9-year-old Otto describes what the rest of us would see if we're suddenly looking out at a cornfield, right? I mean, you talk about, do the corn stalks look relatively healthy? Are there a lot of bugs? What's their height? Does the water look parched? Does it look, the land parched? Does it look relatively well irrigated? And you can learn a lot from, even if you're just a layperson, if you're just looking at a field, you can learn a lot, can't you, about whether or not that farm is successful. But what the dad said to Otto is, he's like, when I look at this, I see all of those things. But what I'm looking for are the invisible aspects of this field, is the root structure. And literally, the main message he wanted to get across to his son is, my success or failure as a farmer is determined by the extent to which I cultivate the fertile topsoil, which is literally, if we're talking about a farm, the point where the visible and the invisible realms intersect and intertwine. That's where you make your living as a farmer. And it is exactly the same for social fields, whether it's a school, whether it's a family, whether it's a community. There are the visible aspects of Winnetka Public Schools, what people do, say, or see. And those things matter, and we should pay attention to them. And when any of us generally try to bring about a real transformational change, we're only focused on the visible realm. That's just where we exist. And what's left untended is the invisible component of Winnetka Public Schools, the inner conditions from which all of the people operate, the emotional selves that are experiencing the world and each other first and foremost, and constructing the stories that help people make sense of the world around them. And we're not paying attention to those things. We're not asking publicly the questions enough. What is it that we have informally agreed here never to discuss? What am I most afraid of if I actually really tried to bring about a change that had both a distant goal and some upfront responsibilities for me? And it's only when we all develop a deeper capacity and a way of seeing both the visible and the invisible realms that we even have a chance at bringing about the sorts of changes. It still doesn't mean they'll happen. So one other slide I want to show you, because just to add one other layer, there is no more intractable set of shared cultural icons in this American society than the images associated with public schooling. You could take somebody from 120 years ago and have them travel through time to this moment, and this world would seem very new. I went to Evanston Township High School. I don't even recognize downtown Evanston. That was like 20 years ago. Forget about 120, right? But that person could walk into almost any public school and be like, whew, okay. Now I'm seeing some familiar stuff. The reason this is significant, you start to mess with any of these things, you are messing with people's emotional coherence, even if they didn't work for them. What do you mean you're getting rid of cursive? I learned cursive, right? What do you mean you're trying some different form? Like, what do you mean you're getting rid of the SAT? I had to take the SAT. I mean, so it doesn't make the task easier, but it does, I think, deepen our capacity to think through how can we possibly, ourselves and in the company of others, negotiate these emotional minefields in ways that will better serve the interests of our kids today. Because that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about figuring out a way to improve the system for kids today who are entering a very different world than the world that all of us grew up in. And that we are, in many respects, ill-equipped to even think about how to help them negotiate. And yet, it's down to us, people, okay? So we got to give it the best shot. We got to try to figure it out. All right, I want to shift, actually, and now start to focus in a little bit more specifically on the incredible trove of insight and revolutionary change that is in all of us already. By just asking you the simplest question. If the focus of education is about learning, and if ideally the focus of learning in the future is even more customized to the individual, then it would stand to reason that a good place to start is, well, when and where was I when I learned best? When and where were you when you learned best in your life? I don't care if it was in school. I don't care if it was out of school. I don't care if you were 5 years old. I don't care if it was last week. Just that the experience was deeply meaningful to you and real learning occurred. Just take 30 seconds to see if you can summon in your own mind one or more possible stories that speak to that for you.
Camping, hiking, it's actually like outward bound in those environments where I actually probably learned more information, absorbed it more readily, and carried it with me. Like I can think back to learning specific things, and I know that versus being in a chemistry class, what did I learn? Like, I'm sure I learned elements, I just don't know it. I obviously don't learn how to write, but those.
So, I know that that's just not even remotely enough time, so apologies in advance, because all of those stories deserve a little bit of a longer telling and audience, and hopefully there'll be some follow-up to really think through that question here, at least in Winnetka. I'm just curious, quick popcorn style, we'll do this in a couple of ways. Just shout out the location of the learning. In other words, if it was third grade, or Outward Bound, just to get a quick sense of where some of the stories of this particular group of people took place. Anybody? Home? First job.
Overnight summer camp.
Overnight summer camp. Hospital. High school. Grad school.
Labor grade.
What'd you say?
Labor room.
Labor room. That's a learning experience for all involved. Two more? Outside. Library. And a foreign country. And next bit, just to hear, because again, the purpose of thinking about these types of stories is to try to, the goal is to mine the personal for insights that will enhance the professional. What insights from our personal learning experiences can be used to improve the quality of our professional learning environments and the learning environments of our kids? So now I'm curious in hearing more briefly, a core attribute of what made the labor room, the foreign country, the library, such a powerful learning experience because we're limited without hearing the whole story. So what were some of the core attributes that made those different stories so powerful?
Key relationships.
Key relationships.
Actively involved, actively not passive.
Being actively involved.
Being humble.
Being humbled. Being challenged.
Feedback. Immediate feedback.
Receiving immediate feedback. Knowing where you stand.
At your own pace, space and time.
Unfolding at your own pace.
Clear vision and the teacher.
You never were wondering, why are we doing this? Clear purpose, and you said something about the teacher?
Yes.
And just the role of the teacher, was that?
A particular teacher that makes you fall in love with the subject and makes you study harder.
Yeah, there was this teacher. Almost everybody that wins the Nobel Prize, the most common refrain that they hear at the speeches across all of the different categories, there was this teacher. There was this teacher. Two more. Asking questions.
Passion?
A real sense of passion. So I mentioned before, I've been gathering stories from people all around the country for the last few years, and initially it was just something that I was doing with schools as a way to try to help them focus in on what they were doing well, because obviously once you get a list like that across a community, the ways in which your community is already providing those types of experiences, celebrate those things. And the ways in which you're not, that's where you start. I mean, again, it ain't rocket science. But what I noticed after a while was that in every community, the list that was produced was always exactly the same. The language may have changed a little bit, but whether it was inner city Detroit or suburban Honolulu, the core conditions of transformational learning, according to lived experiences by lots and lots of human beings, were always the same. In fact, there it is. And so that's a word cloud that's meant to reflect, and obviously the bigger the size, the more often it appears across thousands of stories. What's the secret sauce, people? I mean, what does it take in order to create the greatest likelihood that somebody is going to have a transformational learning experiences? What our own lives and stories tell us is that it is some combination of challenging, engaging, relevant, supportive, and experiential. And to the earlier point about class size, I think it's important to underscore that what I just described can unfold in a lot of different environments. It doesn't have to be one-on-one. Some of your stories probably were one-on-one. Some were probably a part of a community of 20 or 30 or even more folks. So there is no one way. And yet there are some core anchors. And I just want to share one audio story of another person's bit. This is actually a story that's from the book, and we did a public radio series in DC.
Early in my professional life, I was lucky enough to be an artist in residence at the Children's National Medical Center, better known as Children's Hospital. I would go once a week along with a piano player, and we would wander the halls, gathering patients, their families, and sometimes the staff, to dance. I was intensely interested in the beautiful, often haunting movements that the young people made with whatever part of their body was mobile. And I loved seeing the powerful connection that making art together brought to parents and children coping with illness. Dancing gave the children a chance to have their bodies back just for themselves. I remember one child held tightly in a body cast who created a dance with her face and toes. Another boy, desperately eager to be in his own bedroom in time for Christmas, made a dance about the toys he hoped he might get to open when he finally got home. During my 5 years at the hospital, we only did one major performance where I brought in the dancers and the company I direct, and we put on a show. On that day, they brought all the kids, families, and available staff down to the atrium, where we danced several pieces from our repertory. Except for the lack of a conventional stage, it was very much a full-fledged performance. One of the dances, called Bonsai, was a quiet piece that told the story of how the caretaking of these long-lived trees passes on to a new generation. I noticed as we were performing this dance that a youngster in the front row had fallen asleep. I'd met this child earlier in the week and had liked her, so I was sad to see her miss so much. As I was leaving the hospital, slightly dejected, one of the nurses ran after me and said in a very enthusiastic voice, Liz, thank you. We've been trying to get that kid to go to sleep for 3 days. Up to that point, I'd thought one of the most important functions of art was to wake people up. Here I was confronted with information teaching me the opposite. I was grateful. I would never have learned this if I had stuck to the conventions of my profession and stayed only in the studio making dances. If we're lucky and paying attention, we can discover over and over again that the intersection of art and real life affects the art form as much as it affects the community and the people involved.
What I love about that too is we have no excuse. We know intuitively, we know through experience, and now we know through research that what matters most, what has the potential to change human lives, has so little to do with what we learn and so much to do with how the experience shapes who we understand ourselves to be. And that it always unfolds in a way that can't fully be predicted and yet does have some core attributes that can be our North Star to ensure that to the greatest extent possible, in whatever environment we work in, amidst all of the dysfunctional aspects and the ways in which things aren't perfectly aligned to support us, we can create challenging, engaging, relevant, supportive, and experiential environments. And we can start to hold ourselves accountable to that, in addition to the things that others do. And if we don't, shame on us. So the last thing that I want to do with you all, and educators in particular have been so beat down by the misalignment between why so many of us got into the field and what we experienced. This is why the burnout is so high. This is why the average tenure of a teacher is 5 years. I'm spending all year in a couple of DC classrooms, and I'm following these two amazing 20-something teachers who are already burned out. They're 25, and they can't do it. What they are being asked to do is unsustainable. And so there is, for good reason, that when educators in particular, but now we have a wider net, start to imagine this where to from here, yeah, but I mean, come on, I mean, it sounds great, but there's just no way. We can't do it, Illinois and cash-strapped and economies and blah, it's just, it sounds nice, but we just can't do it. So I want to finish by suggesting that for now, at least, for the next 5 minutes, I want you to just suspend your yeah buts and exist with me fully in a world of what if. And just imagine, based on what we've talked about and thought about tonight, what are some of the what-ifs that, to you, are most essential for what it is that, as a community, we're trying to bring about? And I want to just treat it like Quaker meeting. And if you don't know Quaker meeting, here are the rules. It's very simple, okay? We'll take no more than 5 minutes. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. Speak if the Spirit moves you. And because we're a pretty big room, if you do choose to share your what if, even if you're not a teacher, use your best teacher voice. Imagine the person furthest from you in the auditorium, because it would really be a bummer if they hear you and they're like, what did he say? Because obviously if you're going to share your what if, it matters. We need to hear it. And let's see what occurs to us.
What if I had the time to spend the day in my child's classroom?
What if we always assumed best intentions?
What if every child felt listened to?
What if we remembered what it was like to be a child?
What if every child had an IEP?
What if parents were considered a valuable resource?
What if grades did not exist?
What if every teacher had an assistant in the classroom?
I want to modify it slightly, and going forward, I only want to hear, what if I?
What if I pay attention? What if I let go of my own ambition for my child?
What if I really slow down? What if I leave my child alone?
What if I listen to what my child's saying every day?
What if we found a way to stitch together all of our what if I's in a way that saw both the distant goal and the urgent up-close needs, and that figured out bit by bit, step by step, a way to begin with ourselves and start modeling a different type of commitment to and understanding of children. Sure, there are a lot of things that are against us, and yet it wasn't that long ago that a 23-year-old fruit vendor who had spent his entire life living on the same dusty patch of a back alley in Tunisia, so frustrated with the way that he had been publicly shamed, spontaneously set himself on fire and set in motion a chain of events that has completely recast the global landscape in ways that would have been thought completely impossible 18 months ago. Gaddafi, gone. Mubarak, gone. The earliest seeds of a different type of commitment to freedom being sown. Dark skies still ahead. And yet, if it can happen there, it can happen here. Thank you.
I think tonight gives everyone a very short glimpse of why SAM is going to be really good for our staff, for our administrative team, for our teachers, and for our community. We thank you again for coming out and sharing this evening with us. I know that I feel, as we're also at the end of the school year, thinking about how we're going to sort of end things calmly and peacefully, But instead of focusing on that now, I just feel very energized for what the next few weeks and months will bring for us in the short term, and as we look for that distant vision in terms of where we're going to go with our strategic planning process and the work that we're going to be engaged in next year. So again, thank you for coming and being a part of that. Logistically, Sam is going to be here for a little bit. We have some books out in the lobby still. If you would like to have those signed or to have a couple of minutes with Sam and share some thoughts or ask questions, we certainly encourage you to do that. Again, thanks to the entire foundation for your support of this evening's event.